Listen, I know we mean well. I know that our words, we have a good heart behind our words. But not every time that we say something that we know we are getting from God, we articulate it the way that people are understanding it in a loving way. Like I can get a word from God, but my natural body may override, it may be able to articulate what He's telling me to tell you, but it may not come out the way that He wanted it to. And we have to remember, as leaders of our community, as leaders of our household, as leaders of an organization or what have you, we have to be mindful that people are not going to receive it the way that we're intending it if we're not saying it the way that God intended for us to say it. I'm coming from Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. It says, "Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man." This is talking about prayer, or it's talking about how we should approach people of the faith and be able to help them with understanding what it is that we're saying. When we're having to know and walking in wisdom, wisdom is definitely a lifelong walk. It says in verse 5, "Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time." So if you're walking in wisdom, and if you're getting wisdom, wisdom is coming from God. So if you're giving somebody wisdom, or if you're giving them something of knowledge or a word of knowledge or of wisdom, this is something that God is giving you. He's entrusting you to give them this information. But if you are letting your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, think about salt. Before there were refrigerators, and I'm going back, way back in the day, they used to use salt as a preservative. Salt also can be used if you're making a steak or you're making chicken or some sort of meat. It can also be used as seasoning. It says, "Seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man." So if someone is asking you, "Hey, you're saying you heard from God, what did He say?" and you're answering with a harsh tone, they're not going to be able to understand what it is, because they're going to hear they're not going to hear wisdom that you're supposed to be walking in. They're going to hear emotions, and our emotions sometimes don't line up with the wisdom that God has given us. So we have to be able to deny and reject that fleshly part of us where we're feeling emotional, where we're saying this person needs to hear what I'm saying, and I'm using my hand, I'm pointing at you while I'm talking to you, because now you're looking at what I'm doing and you're not listening to what I'm saying. There's two ways that we can use salt in this sense. We can use it to be seasoned with grace, and so we can season people. We can be tactful with the way that we're using our words. We can be graceful and be able to help them, and as we're answering them, even if they're not even giving us the same level of grace. Grace doesn't always work two ways. We expect to receive grace, and that person may not be at the part of life or with their walk with God to where they are giving you grace, but that doesn't stop you from giving grace to them. Be the example that you want to see. I say that all the time. We have to be the example that we want to see in people. And they sometimes may not know, or they may not show what we are expecting to get from them. But that doesn't stop us from being able to be that example for them. So we can use that salt to season them and help them understand and say, hey, this is something that God wants you to hear. But they won't hear it if they're hearing our emotions. Or we can use that salt to leave them salty. They're going to be mad at you. They're going to be like, this person is giving me this attitude. I'm not even hearing what I need to hear, or that God is trying to get through to me, because the messenger is not seasoning their words with grace. It's seasoned the right way. There's two ways you can use seasoning. You use too much seasoning, you got a salty piece of meat. And you're going to have a salty person if you're not using that salt gracefully.